Well, welcome in, everyone. So great to have you with us. I'm going to turn our music off in the chat here, but I think it would be nice to get started on this little conversation about making remote work work. And I figure a few of us are joining from our in-office, and some of us might be joining from our remote work home office. However, you're joining us today, welcome in. Um, I just want to just take a moment to just introduce myself and just let you know a little bit about who we are and why we're here. My name is Patlee. I am the owner and lead facilitator at Reyou Mindfulness Collective. And Reyou works supportively with people and teams that are experiencing major transitions to help them build meaningful connections that will improve their mental well-being and deepen resilience. So we do all of this through capacity building workshops, through one-on-one mentorship, through writing and resilience coaching. And you can find more information about what we do on our website. SJ just posted the links in the chat there, reyoumindfulness.com. And yeah, so welcome in to this event. We call this Mindful Lunch. So Mindful Lunch is a free monthly, almost monthly lunchtime learning session where we just connect with a speaker and as a community, just sort of sit together to learn a little bit more about one thing that's a real life experience that can really, from another human's perspective, we can have, pull some lessons that can help us build our stress resilience and just really improve our own mental health and well-being on a personal and professional level. We're going to talk about remote work today, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you Susan Bader. Susan is a changemaker. She's an innovative professional with 30 plus years experience working with adults, youths, and children with disabilities. She's an active collaborator with stakeholder groups, including nonprofit organizations, businesses, government, and people with disabilities. And she's a manager of the Community Futures Entrepreneurs with Disability program in rural Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And she works with 29 Community Futures offices, 29, to support the success of rural entrepreneurs with health conditions or disabilities. And she lives in rural Manitoba. She's been doing remote work for how many years now, Susan?
Well, since 1997, so a long time ago.
Long time ago. Long time ago. All right, so she's here to tell us a little bit more about that. We're going to talk a little bit about remote work and why it works and some ways that we can get better results from working remotely. Even if you don't work remotely, you work with other people who work remotely, or you manage or supervise people who work remotely, and how we get that to be something that supports the mental health and well-being of everyone that is included and not included in that picture, including the people who have nothing to do with your remote work, right? Family members and so on. So I want to welcome in Susan. Welcome in. Welcome in. And so let me start off with this question. So we talked about in the poll there, how do you feel about remote work? Is it a blessing, a curse, or a little bit of both? How do you feel about remote work? And since you've been doing it since 1997.
Yeah, for me, it's been a total blessing. I'm a mom, a single mom of 3 kids. So definitely remote work gave me the flexibility that I needed to be able to manage my day and also be close to the kids. 3 kids, lots of activities, school, somebody got called for one reason or another. So just being able to go back and forth, not having that long commute really made a difference. And now my kids are adults, but I am actually now and look after my parents. So the roles changed a bit, but it's definitely really important for me to be able to to work from home and definitely had that blessing. And also just the way I work, I like to super focus. And I like to work with very little distractions. So for my work style as well, it really works well for me.
Awesome. Wonderful. I like that point that you mentioned when, we often think about remote work being something that is valuable to parents who are giving care to young children who are at home. And I know that for me, for a while, until I started interacting and meeting the people that I work with as clients and as collaborators, like understanding why they choose to work remotely. It's not just because they were in that caregiving role as a parent, or some of them, they aren't parents at all, but being able to be a caregiver to someone else required that they be on call and more available. And so when you think about those people who are sort of in that position of caring for an older parent, an older adult, a sibling sometimes, who might be another adult, that element of having that flexibility when it comes to being able to work remotely is really important. So Susan, I'm a little bit like you, where I've been working. I wouldn't even use the term remote. Um, I, remote work is kind of a very new thing to me. Like that word only came into my mouth during COVID. I've always worked from home. I've always valued my home office, my home space, and being able to work on my own. Um, uh, But one of the things that I appreciate about being able to work remotely, since that's the nature of the language now, is the role that it plays in helping us, well, helping me manage my own anxiety, right? But even when you are working remotely, that kind of comes in, that comes in quite frequently. And there are lots of articles out there that will talk about ways that we can navigate the pitfalls of remote work. There's one that we can share that in the chat with the audience members. Um, this is from Bamboo HR. It's a blog article on 10 tips for working remotely. So we'll share that in the chat with you, but I'll just mention like the headings about the tips for working remotely. So there's, over communicate with your colleagues, always maintaining that constant contact. They talk about developing a routine around your remote work, taking care of yourself. That's super important. Creating a focused environment, using the right kind of tools, discovering your work style, as you said, Susan, logging off, socializing, and enjoying the perks, all those kind of things, right? But what I love about what we get to do with Mindful Lunch is we get to put a human face in all of that, right? We take it out of the blogosphere and we put it into like this personal and human and connected sort of space. So Susan, you have your own list of tips for making remote work work. And so that's what I wanna sort of tease out with you a little bit. Because you told me that you got six rules to live by when it comes to making remote work work. So how about we talk about that for a little bit? So the first tip that you said was to be intentional about your work hours and maintain healthy work boundaries. What exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, and this one I've definitely developed over the years, and I'm a pretty big stickler to it now. It's, I have work hours and I really stick to those work hours in terms of communicating with others. So I may flex my hours in the background, but when I'm sending emails, I'm very conscious that I'm sending those during that person's work hours and my work hours. Now, I actually work in two different time zones. So
Hmm.
sometimes I have to be a little mindful of that as well. I don't like to send an email that I would send to my colleagues in Manitoba at 8:30 that's going to arrive in my colleagues at 7:30 in the morning in Saskatchewan. But really being mindful of that. Many years ago, my boss and I started a bit of a debate via email, and it was 9 o'clock at night, and I was just really wanting to win this debate. And then I realized, wow, he's a night owl. I am not. And so there was no, I hadn't, there, I was not going to win. And winning was probably not a good thing when he was my boss. So after that, I kind of made an intentional rule. just, that I don't email after hours, especially my boss. But also that I want people to respect my hours. So to me, I want to be a role model and respect their hours. So I use a lot of apps, like I use the Outlook app and I'll delay send. So sometimes I'll have 5 emails that I worked on after hours, but I've delayed them so that they come in, the next day for the person.
Mhm.
Or if I do use text sometimes for work, I'll put those in my notes app and then I'll just have a reminder to send that the next day. So I try to be mindful of that. And like I say, especially because of the time changes, depending on when people are working and I'm mindful too. I'm not queuing those up to go Monday at 8:30 a.m. Everybody needs some time to get to their desk and just get into the work mode, right? So, or I might know, oh, somebody's got a really hectic schedule, or lunch hour, they're running around with kids. Well, let's queue that up for two, like
Yeah.
having that flexibility, but kind of knowing your audience a bit, but making sure that, I get the respect back too. So, I will get after hours emails. I may check them, but I'm not responding to them because I want people to know I'm not available. But I mean, in my job, I'm not a 911 operator.
Mm.
And that's what I tell, my staff. So every staff person that I meet, the first orientation, I say to them, I care about my job, but after hours, I'm not going to be responding. And so just to let you know, I'm not being rude to you. I value your email. I also let them know on weekends that email is going to be lost. I get a lot of emails, so if you send me something on Saturday, the chance of me seeing it on Monday is very slim. So please resend that. So it's just kind of that respect, but I also make sure that I don't send those emails to them on Saturday. And occasionally there's exceptions, right? If we're trying to do travel arrangements over the weekend because we have work travel or things like that. But most of the time I say, you know what? You need your time, I need my time, and let's create that respect. But I am very intentional about it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love that. And the key word there is being so intentional about it and maintaining that healthy work boundary as a two-way sort of communicative process, right? Because it's not just about your boundary, it's about valuing and teaching other people that they can have boundaries as well. And that's how we get them to respect our boundaries. I think that that's like I would probably say that that's really up there for me as like a really important thing, that healthy work boundary. Because when you've got family and you've got other things, you've got life and so on, like I'm not very good friends with my phone because my phone is on silent and do not disturb half the time. So I'm like, for most people, if you need to get me, like calling me is not that big a way to try to get that done. And I also love what you said. I'm not a 911 operator. I wonder if I can use that with my kids. Um, I'm not a 911 operator. Like it's not everything is an expectation for a response or needing my urgent attention. That is so good. Okay, so you have another tip. There's six of them, and you have another tip, and I really like this one. Avoid back-to-back online meetings. Tell us about that one, because that creeps in a whole lot in our remote workspace. But tell us what you mean by that one.
For me, it's really important to be present, and to be really able to take the most out of each meeting that I meet. So for me, back to back doesn't work. I need time after each meeting to make some notes, have some action items, prioritize some emails. And so I really make sure that as much as possible, I don't do those back to back meetings. I also try to make sure that I have time between meetings. I'm a real firm believer in movement breaks. And my life doesn't mean that I always get out there for that 1 hour exercise blitz. So I need to take those movement breaks throughout the day. So what I try to do is before each Zoom call, I take that 5 to 10 minutes. I make sure that I'm in the ready to go. I have pets. I feed the pets. I take them out. I try to get a bit of nature. get myself grounded, get my notes ready, fill up my water, all of those things. So back to back Zoom meetings don't leave me that time. And but they really don't leave me that headspace. And
Mhm,
I'm not sure that I'm can be the best I can be if I don't have some kind of break in between.
mhm.
The other thing I do is that since COVID, everybody wants to be on Zoom or Teams or something like that. And I'm a little old fashioned. If I can get away with a phone call, I'll do it. And I'm a little bit of a stickler that I don't usually go to a Zoom meeting without an agenda.
Uh-huh.
So if there's an agenda and then I feel that then that should be a meeting. If not, maybe it's an email or a phone call. Because I think sometimes there is a stress of being online,
Mhm,
of having to show up that way.
mhm,
So I think being able to have less meetings online is also really helpful.
mhm. Yeah, that's such a great point. And I have a little bit of learning to do with that as well because I am notoriously bad at phone calls. Like I really dislike speaking on the phone. Um, so that's never my go-to. I would really rather a video call. Yet I do value video calls being really meaningful. To me, that's the next step up from an email. And I really love there's this little quote that I have on my laptop. This meeting could have been an email. Like most of the time it could be solved with just an email. But yeah, for me it's like email, video call, in-person meeting, and yeah, that's the priority level in terms of that connection. Because if we're gonna meet, if we're gonna talk, it needs to be about something for something. And however we can do that and get it done without taking up too much of each other's living time, then that's super important. I like that one. Okay, so number three, you had shared with me, be clear to others that you're working from home. I'm curious about that one. Be clear to others that you are working from home. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so because I'm working from home, family and neighbors often think, "Oh, you're there." And so I had one neighbor that kept showing up, and I'm like, "Actually, I'm working." So I mean, I will be clear and I will put a note on the door. I'm in a session, I'm at work, I'm not available. The other things I'll do is make sure that on social media I'm not posting, right? If I'm at work, then I'm at work. I also, there's some exceptions, but I try to be mindful of when I'm responding to texts from family. So if it's not, if it's just, hey, what are we doing this weekend? Then that'll be an after work meeting. Because usually if I was in an office, family wouldn't phone me just for that,
Yeah,
right? So I try to make sure that people around me understand that just because I'm home doesn't mean you can drop by unexpected, doesn't mean that you can't understand my work hours, because when I work, I like to really focus. And so those interruptions, I find then it takes me a bit to get back into my focus and where was I at. And so, yeah, so that's been really important to me. And I know that doesn't work for everybody, but that's kind of what I try to do. And even with my kids, I respect their work. So, if we're going to text, maybe that's going to be at lunch hour, right? Or things like that. But I try to teach others, because otherwise everybody would just drop by and visit, which is lovely, but doesn't get me through my day. And I just say, if I can get through my work day, then I have all that other time for you. But if I'm interrupted multiple times during the day, it just extends my work day, because I have a list of things I want to get through today.
yeah, yeah. No, that's super important, and I really value you explaining that. I don't know if there's anyone else in our Zoom audience who perhaps work from home with other people who are in the home with them, and what that experience is like for them in terms of the interruptions. I know that with my kids are younger, they're elementary and high school age. And so if I'm working on a day when it's an in-service for them, a little bit of a challenge. It's beyond a challenge because I really do have to be super clear that I am at work and no, you cannot come and interrupt me and ask me, what's for lunch or can you go outside or should you do this or should you just pretend that I'm not here? But then, when you hear the huge crash in the kitchen, for example, it becomes a completely different story. I'm wondering if anyone else in the audience has had experiences where they've had any kind of challenge with setting those boundaries for I'm working now and these are my work hours and I would like you to really honor and respect that. I also want to just shout out in the chat Geraldine's post that she loves doing the phone calls, using it as an alternate to Zoom. Even with coaching clients, because it gives folks the freedom to walk and talk, stare out the window, focus in a different way without getting their eyes tired. Like, I really appreciate that as well. I've tried the walking phone call thing. Like, I'll take a phone call and I'll go for a walk around the block. But what I find is the when you're walking and you're getting like kind of breathless, and that kind of changes the tone of your phone conversation. And
Can I just add, I'm not necessarily talking about going for a walk, although I do that a lot of the time too, but even to pace around the room,
oh,
because
okay.
I mean, if you're thinking about right brain, left brain thinking, then you get to move. And I also find it extremely unnatural to look at someone on a screen for entire conversation.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
don't do that in person. We stare off to the side of the room, we look out there, but on Zoom, somehow we interpret that as being rude
Okay.
or
Wonderful.
or not paying attention or whatever. Yeah, anyway.
Yes. Yes. That is a very good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah. I like the staring off too. That's part of my own mindfulness practice, like being able to look into the distance. But yeah, I love that. I love the points in the chat. Tam says she's having a challenge right now with her dog being at arm's length and barking with her. Isn't that just the thing when you're on like a Zoom call and something is happening off to the side and you kind of have to just keep that straight face because it's so fun. All right. Um, Susan, back to the list here in terms of the tips. Looking in, your dog barks at you in the shower. So what you saying?
I think she said she's getting her best ideas
That
in the
was
shower.
that was for when you're moving. I get my best ideas when I'm
When you're
moving in the
moving.
shower. She does bark at me in the shower sometimes, yes. All the time. Barks all the time.
Wonderful. Happy Wednesday, folks. All right. So Susan, back to the tips. So I love this one. Plan and schedule in-person meetings every week. I'm going to say that one again. Plan and schedule in-person meetings every week. Tell us about that one, please, Susan.
Yeah, so that was me growing grocery shopping after work and the clerk being a little overwhelmed with my oversharing because I hadn't talked to anybody in person for like days. And I just needed another adult. And now with self-checkout, sometimes you don't even have that. So, I mean, for me, I had to be very intentional that I need to be out of my space, out of my four walls. And so it was just looking at my calendar. Okay, are there some lunch meetings that I could do? Is there a colleague I can meet up with? Is there an event happening in my community around what I'm doing? I work in the entrepreneurial space, so often there's different events that I can go to. Is there professional development I can go to? Is there a networking group? And I started a bunch of networking groups and I've kept some of them going because it's important. And just to be out there, just to be with people. I'm an introvert, so staying at home feels really comfortable. But I know that I need that social. So that's also on my evenings, is that I am intentional about trying to make sure that I'm out in the community. I sign up for different classes on things, just because I know that for my mental health, I need to be out and about a little bit more than I normally would as an introvert, right? So I make sure that I'm seeing people and connecting with people. And you never know where those connections lead, right? And having those conversations with people. And I also have a few colleagues that it's just like they know that, okay, they're going to spend a little extra time with me on the phone today because I may not have seen or talked to anybody during my day other than the pets. So they're also okay with that too. So having those few people that you can go to, but also trying to plan things, in between. A lot of people like working from coffee shops, libraries, different space. I haven't found that 100% works for me because I like my stuff around me and I kind of, but I know lots of people really that gives them that social aspect as well. So
Yeah, I think that, like, I love that you mentioned that point. Like, I just started just this September, I decided that I'm now going to shift my my day off work, my intentional day off, being at my computer, and to shift that into a different mode of work, but to do that on Fridays, where I can actually schedule a coffee or a lunch with a friend in person. And however that happens, like even if it's just a conversation with someone around something work related, or if it's around something completely different, but to be really intentional of doing that once a week on a Friday, just to get out of that I'm living in this virtual world kind of feeling in terms of the interaction with adults. I think that's just so super important because there was one study that I came across. I think I'd posted the link to some of the key points from it, but this was from an American set of information source that pointed out that something like 23% of the persons that they surveyed who were doing remote work reported feeling lonely. And that was the 23% was specific to I'm lonely, but I stay in the house because I don't have a reason to leave. And so the intentionality is giving yourself a reason to leave, because that's part of the dynamic as well, like not feeling trapped in your work and sort of cocooned and overwhelmed by this idea of being alone and by yourself, even with the workplace problem solving, simply because you do not have that physical human connection of being out in a different space. Yeah. How about this one? Number 5, create systems to remain focused. Tell us about that. What are your systems for remaining focused?
yeah, and I think sometimes it's challenging, especially at home when, you see the piles of laundry or the other things that need to be done, right? And so it's like, oh, right. And my office setup is not ideal. I don't have walls. I'm in an open setup, so I need to be extra focused. So for me, it's showing up dressed, ready to work as if I was going to the office, making sure that I'm creating that to-do list. Years ago, I used to be able to finish my to-do list. Now I can't, and I'm okay with that. But making sure I have, my list there and some that are going to carry on to the next day. For me, when I really need to focus, I'm turning my phone over, making sure that I have less apps up and no distractions. So sometimes I focus too much and I can go a long time without taking a break, because I really just enjoy what I'm doing and I get into it. So I do set alarms to make sure that I take breaks, or I will set an alarm about, that a meeting's coming up, those kinds of things, because when I'm turning off all those apps, then I have a less reminders. So I kind of compensate by that. And I make sure that I have movement breaks. So by my desk, I have a little sheet of office stretches that I can see. It's a bit old school just to have a piece of paper, but it helps. I make sure, just like somebody mentioned, like when I'm taking calls, I'm walking, just pacing around my house, just to have those kinds of movement breaks. But all of those movements helps me to refresh. I drink a lot of water, which also results in movement breaks, and that's good too. So just trying to make sure, because if you don't move or you don't change, it's hard to focus as well, right? So, so yeah, those are some of the things I do, but I think it just allows me to make sure that I know I'm at work and this is what I'm focused on.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense. There are two things that I wanted to sort of pick up on with what you just said. Like one about the alarms and the movement breaks. And this kind of ties into what you said with the second point about avoiding back-to-back online meetings. Like there is actual neuroscientific data that shows us that with brain fMRI imaging, the level of uh, processing and the effectiveness of what needs to be done within the prefrontal cortex, like the part of the brain that deals with creativity and problem solving and really sort of reasoning and analyzing things, like it diminishes over the course of the day when you have those online meetings, those constant meetings back to back. It doesn't even have to be online, it's physical. Because you're operating in a different level, at a different level, neurologically speaking. But when we can have those breaks, those movements, those opportunities for, even if it's to just take a few steps away, sip something, um, pace around for a little bit, it actually, again, when we look at the data on fMRI imaging, when they look at people who have those kind of breaks in between, they see a different pattern in terms of the way that the neuroconnectivity is working, which means that those people are actually showing that they're more connected, they're more refreshed, they're better able to problem solve, and they're actually much more likely to get through that list of to-do things that they've got on their calendar for the day. The other thing that I wanted to make a point of, like I just want you to say again the importance of showing up dressed and ready for your day as if you were going to the office. Because to me, that's like so important for getting your head into the game for working. Um, and I just want to hear from anyone else in the audience, like if that's ever come up and been one of those things for them where they're like, am I going to remote work today? How am I going to show up for work today, even though none of my colleagues might see me online?
I have had many pajama days or fleece leopard print robe days. And I understand that ritual of putting on the clothes and putting on the garment and the vestiture of work. And for me, it depends what the work is. Now, I'm not full-time in my entrepreneurial gig working from home now. I work a lot out of the office, but it depends on what the work is. Sometimes my work is reading a book that's relevant to my craft. But I also consider, as part of my job description, and this gets a little bananas, I consider looking after myself as part of my job description. I consider not doing an 8-hour day every day part of my job description. So I've really deliberately backed off. For me, that works. I have backed off the formality of getting dressed because sometimes that just feels like too much. And I just want to sit down and write something,
Yes.
right? So I think it really depends on the nature of your work. And I would guess, Susan, that you're much more engaged with your partners. You're looking after a lot of people. You're talking to people at levels of, I'm going to say, government and organizationals and not-for-profits, that there's a readiness, a different kind of readiness that's required. And I totally get that. And for me, it depends on the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's got to be whatever works, right? The
Mhm.
most, wherever you're going to be the most productive, right? just like I'm more of a morning person, right? So I
Mhm.
want to fill my day with more morning meetings than
Mhm.
evening, later meetings. But other people are not. Like other people are like, don't talk to me in that first couple hours. Like get me at 2. I am great at 2, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's whatever works, and I think working from home gives you that flexibility, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's I think it's wonderful if part of your day doesn't also have to be in an office chair, right?
Mhm.
Doing that reading, that you can be in a different part of your house or in a different space, right? And because that gets your thinking a different ways too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel knowing, especially as a remote worker, knowing what is your job description, because
Yeah.
we're so restricted, I feel, by what we think we take that from the corporate sector, that these are my hours, I must be at the computer at these times, da 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 da. But really, what is your job description? And a part of your job description is, I need to make sure that I feel good. Right? So what does it take for you to feel good?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I so agree with that. And I think the key word here is, well, there are two phrases that make up the key idea here is one, it depends. And two, let's redefine how we think about productivity
Mhm.
when it comes to work,
Yep.
right?
Amen.
Like,
Yep.
what exactly do we mean about productive? Because like I agree with you, Geraldine. Sometimes my most productive days are me sitting in my pajamas, not showered, with my laptop in my couch, and I get so much more done, but
Mm.
I feel really good at the end of the day about all of what I've accomplished, as opposed to those days where I get up, I'm showered, hair's made up, clothes, looking real professional. I'm sitting in front
Yeah.
of my computer, and it's just a different way to be productive. And it's whatever works for you. So it completely depends.
And that's just it. Like, I think you really, like, what I appreciate so much about what you're telling us, Susan, is that it's yours. Like, this is what I do, and this might be useful to you, and maybe you want to adapt it to what works for you. But I think for entrepreneurs or remote workers, it's so important to really get familiar with what works for you.
Yeah.
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 Exactly. And try different things on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being
Yeah.
try does it work? I remember when I had the kids at home, sometimes it worked that like I just needed to do a bit of work before, we went before they got up and did all the craziness of school,
Yeah.
and then I paused my day. Then we did let's get out the door,
Yeah.
and whatever that looked like. And then I actually had my shower to start my day after that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, I did some of that pajamas or, comfy clothes out the door, then I worked. But it didn't mean that first hour I wasn't working. It was just I was doing the work that maybe needed different attention or
Mm.
different things, right? But I
Yeah.
mean, and then I chunked it and then I flexed my day. So, because when those kids come through the door, I tried to make sure that that wasn't a time when I had a meeting, right? So I
Mm.
could take the time, say hi, how's it going? Get all their stories and still give them that time. And then, okay, get them doing something else so then I could go back and do my last bit, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you just, you take what works and just keep trying different systems, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And then figure out what works, and it might not work every day. You might need that variety, right?
Yeah.
You might, say, 2 days a week I need to be showered and ready to go, but
Mhm.
those other days that doesn't work for me, so I think, yeah, it's figuring it out for sure, what works in your life in the stage you're at the moment.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. All right. I wanna touch on the 6th point here, Susan, and then there's a question that I want to ask Tam, because it's just been burning in my head since I've seen her here on the screen. I really want to ask her about it, but let's touch on your 6th point here, which is embrace the freedom of working from home and the work-life balance it provides. Like, what do you mean by that? How exactly are we supposed to embrace this thing that it's a blessing and a curse and everything in between?
And I think, just kind of what I said previously is finding your mojo, what works in your day, what works for your family. So for me, it's taking planned breaks. I often work over lunch hour or traditional lunch hour because that's when I can focus and the phone isn't going off and the email isn't going off. And so then I have a break later, or I take shorter, smaller breaks. That works for me. I plan breaks to be outside, to move, sometimes reading a novel, any of those kinds of things, so that I'm away from the screens. I'm pretty intentional about that. Often, I find crock pots work really well in my house, and it's about 4 hours for most of those, quick on high menus. So I will often at noon, that's when I will take the time as I'm making my lunch anyway to prep the crock pot, and then it's ready to go when I'm done. So some of those chores I will do. I will, throw the laundry in maybe in the morning, and that's my time at my first break to turn that, into the dryer, those kinds of things. I like the quiet, but I appreciate that other people like music or like that. So just kind of creating the space that works for you. And I kind of reflect on what brings you joy and peace and what makes the workspace the best it can be for you. I think that that's really important too, just to be intentional as much as you can. I mean, some folks aren't able to have a dedicated area for their space, and I appreciate that too, right? But maybe that corner of the table is, just move things aside so you have, the balance that you need. But yeah, so I think for me it's, I don't have a commute, and I love that. So to me, that's, I live in rural. So, a commute for me was typically, 45 minutes to an hour one way. So gaining back that 2 hours, I really try to embrace that with things that I can do and things that bring a little harmony to my household, right? There's nothing better than sitting and working and listening, is here smelling the crock pot, hearing it, knowing that when I'm done, supper's ready and I don't have to worry, right? I don't have to think again because, we're all tired after work. So that kind of is what works for me.
Yeah. No, I love that. I've got the slow cooker too. Our slow cooker is part of our family. We call her Sally, Sally slow cooker. So when my kids ask me, who's doing dinner tonight? I'm like, Sally slow cooker dinner. We already got dinner taken care of. No, that's fantastic. I appreciate it. I want to, I'm just mindful of the time. And I just had a quick question I want to ask of Tamara, 'cause Tamara works in the space of uh, personality typing with the Enneagram. And I was just wondering, as we're going through and listening to this conversation about remote work, are there some personality types that are probably more likely to be more embracing of this remote work lifestyle and all of these things, the freedom and the work-life balance it provides, as opposed to some people that would be like, oh, that's just not my jam. I really don't want to even countenance that.
After we talked about this last week, my brain just kept on going on this. And I think what I certainly look at through the lens of the Enneagram is that there's certain people who are exactly what you said. They're more prone to wanting to withdraw or deal with problems and deal with work things on their own and independently. And there's people who are adverse to control, so they don't want somebody hovering over their shoulder all the time. And so what I like about that is that the Enneagram can give you kind of a picture of that, but then it's exactly what Susan's been talking about this whole time. You have to know you. Just because you prefer to withdraw and do all your things by yourself doesn't mean that's your best fit. That means that that's your most comfortable fit. So that is maybe where you go first is, uh-oh, I have a problem. I'm going to do it by myself. So dealing with work by yourself, that might be your comfort zone, but there might be part of that that would be aided in and helped by putting yourself in a situation where you can't always withdraw, where you can't always be by yourself. I'm very adverse to someone having control over my schedule. Well, I've made a choice now to work on my own, but maybe there are parts of my life now that I'm so adverse to anyone having input in that now I'm kind of hindering my own growth. So I think what I like about some systems like the Enneagram is that they just kind of provide a bit of a picture of what
Mm.
your general tendencies are, and then you can look at them and you can go, okay, so if I want to like really grow and be a more well-rounded person, what parts of these tendencies do I want to challenge? And what parts of these tendencies, when they happen, I can go, oh, I must be a bit stressed out. I need a little time by myself and kind of understand and, give context to some of those behaviors or some of those tendencies.
Wonderful.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like I have gotten a better understanding of why I have, or some of my tendencies towards the way that I show up when it comes to remote work versus in-office work. And part of it is definitely that control piece.
Mm,
And not wanting to have that control over my schedule, like,
mm,
because it's difficult, right? And this is one of the reasons why, as Susan said in the beginning, why a majority of us choose working remotely, because we have all these other obligations that are making a demand on our time.
mhm,
And the 7 to 8 commute, and then the 8 to 4 in office, and then the 4 to 5 commute just doesn't really fit with that.
mhm,
And it doesn't really help our productivity. And so if we can find ways to make all of what needs to happen in work happen, but still have what we need to get done in life happens,
mhm,
then we're better for it in terms of that understanding of the balance that's really needed. But that doesn't necessarily mean, as we're hearing from yourself and from Susan and even from Geraldine, who weighed in, the combination is not going to be the same for everyone. And what works and doesn't work is going to be different for everyone, depending on the way that they view productivity and what they are trying to get out. Like, how do they define, as Geraldine said, their job description?
yeah.
Do you define your job description? So I really love that. I feel like that's a really great connecting piece.
I don't think
Um,
it's about remote or not, right? It's about finding things that work for you and finding workplaces and work situations that work for you.
yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Um, I just wanna, I don't know if there was anything in the chat that we needed to bring forward. Um, choosing what I need versus what I'm supposed to do. I really wanted to find out if there were any other things that anyone else in the audience might think could be one of those, it could be added to that list that Susan provided. We will provide you with a copy of Susan's list, and as well as with the notes. So we'll have that as a PDF that we'll send out after the meeting ends. And along with that, we'll also send you links to a couple of really interesting articles about remote work. And a really great one is about after hours emailing and the the connection between burnout, hostility, and after hours emails. So that's going to be a really great thing to hold on to. Susan, I want to thank you so much for coming on and joining me today. This has been a really valuable and filling lunchtime conversation. Um, I wish we could have had more time. 1 hour is like so thingy, but we've got to go get on to other things related to our remote work and our non-remote work. So the conversation continues offline, off Zoom. Please feel free to reach out to me at Reyou if you've got any questions. You can also connect with us via our website, www.reyoumindfulness.com. Yeah, just a reminder that we'll share the replay and the resources from today's call with you via email. And yeah, if you've got any questions or anything like that, please feel free to give me a shout out at patlee@reyoumindfulness.com. Thank you so much. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, SJ, for your wonderful technical coordination. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Walk good.